And we're back. Welcome to episode 3 of Held Further. Vic, what's going on, man?
Hey, excited to do this. A little bit different this week, but it'll be fun to test new things.
Yeah, I'm looking at the mountains in Aspen, Colorado right now. I'm at an Aspen Institute executive seminar this week, and it's been a lot, but it's been great. Reading Plato and Letter from Birmingham Jail by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Confucius and the Prince. So
Wow,
my head is
that's quite a reading list.
yeah, and the Communist Manifesto and the Declaration of Independence. So my head's like kind of in the clouds a little bit. So
Yeah.
on some of these more current events in healthcare, you may have to take the lead, but I think we have had a busy week of activity and some good things for us to talk about. Why don't we kick it off with the news about KKR and Envision?
Yeah, I think it's important to sort of at least catch up every week because there's a lot changing quickly. Yeah, so KKR and Envision, they filed bankruptcy. Maybe it was Monday or Tuesday. The days kind of run together. It got announced May 15th. So I guess that was Monday. I have a headline. Do you want me to pull that up?
Go ahead and pull it up, but talk through it. And just a question about this, because as I said, I'm dropping in and out from all this Aspen stuff, but did they actually file bankruptcy, or have they basically announced a debt restructuring to try to protect AmSurge because this bankruptcy is likely to be real? Because in the past, I think they were able to, get around the bankruptcy, but now with the rising interest rates, I think that's unlikely that they're going to be able to get around it again.
Yeah, they filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So that's
done.
That's the news. They put it into Chapter 11. They have previously moved assets around internally, in my mind, protecting the most valuable assets, which are the surgery center business. What used to be called AmSurge. I think they still refer to it as AmSurge.
Yeah.
That is a very successful and I think really valuable business. But within the $11 billion of debt, there's the other doc management and emergency department management outsourced business. And it is not very valuable, or it's not as valuable. And so KKR has sort of put, I think, most of the debt, my personal opinion is they put a lot of the debt on the asset they view as struggling. And now they're bringing the whole thing into bankruptcy. But I believe there's a prepackaged arrangement where it currently exists with very little debt, just the debt that it uses to run its own business. And the rest of the debt is with the other side.
Okay.
Now, the bankruptcy process, Chapter 11, is a court-managed process. But I believe my belief is it will make it through and there will be two assets, one that has a ton of debt and not much equity value, and then one that has some equity value for KKR and for whoever else is invested.
Okay, so there's 3 storylines I want to try to dig into. The first one is the actual KKR deal that brought Envision and AmSurge together. I'm going to run through all 3 and then, would love your thoughts on them. So the first one is the original deal, right, that brought Envision and AmSurge together. The second is the No Surprises Act part of the storyline, where United Healthcare and AmSurge ended up getting into a public spat. And it was all around, rates, reimbursement rates. And I think even at that time when it happened, Optum was so strong that everyone knew there was not a lot of leverage there that Envision was going to have in that situation. That was a pre-pandemic, development. And then the third one being the fact that Envision and HCA have a 50-50 joint venture called Valesco, and maybe I can talk a little bit more about that one. That HCA has come out this week and said that this bankruptcy is not going to disrupt their option staffing joint venture. So those are 3, I think, important storylines that come off of this. The private equity one, maybe most relevant for you and I, because it's in the investment world, and this was, a big roll up that I think in the beginning showed some promise, but I think pretty quickly after that started to show some of the weakness, and AmSurge clearly was the more valuable of the two assets for a long time now. So let's maybe start with the deal.
Chris Holden. I mean, AmSurge is a Nashville company. We've known management over there for a long time, and they're a great company. And it was formed in the 90s, really related to American Healthways, which turned into Healthways. The same sort of group of really connected, really successful healthcare entrepreneurs launched both. And they both were really successful. Both went public, both had a long, independent, life. And I'm probably biased because I really like the AmSurge former team, which to your point, with this merger, it was Envision was the named acquirer, but many of the executives and the CEO, Chris Holden, came from the AmSurge side. And in fact, they moved most of the headquarters here to Nashville. And so I think that's true. I'm not sure I'm completely objective, but yes, AmSurge, the team was really strong, and it was the more valuable of the two assets, in my opinion. And it remains to be really valuable. Just for the audience, I'm sure most of our audience knows AmSurge, but they do surgery centers across the country. And it's a well-run business. It's mostly, I think, all joint ventures with docs and health systems. And so usually they own a minority stake to a small majority stake. They own 35 to 65% of the surgery center, but they own a lot of them. So that's the combination. Chris Holden is a really smart and really successful deal guy. He's done a ton of deals in the surgery center business. And I think he had a vision for building the business broader and has been running it as a combined company. I think we could dig into that more, but it probably makes sense to move to the second part of it.
Yeah.
So the Envision side of the business mostly manages emergency departments, but they also hire and manage physician groups and doctors' practices. And the No Surprises Act is really impactful in emergency departments because, your life is in danger. And so rightly, they fix you, and you get whatever anesthesiologist and surgeon and all the things that you need to do to be saved. They do very, very quickly as they need to. But often that will result in an out-of-network charge because maybe you're hiking in Aspen and you live here in Nashville, and so your doc network is not as robust out there. And there's no evil person in that. That just is how our healthcare system is set up. And I think for other good reasons, politicians don't like when people get bills that they weren't expecting, particularly out-of-network bills that can be really high. And I agree with that in general. But in the emergency department, sometimes that is, 50% unfair because you actually needed the service and you weren't in your home network. There are some times when it's maybe used to a health system's advantage, and those people would should be taken care of. Anyway, that act had the repercussion of really being challenging to the Envision side, which manages a lot of EDs. Whether that was smart or not smart to include EDs, it was included, and so that's been a challenge. And then several payers, really led by United Health Group, have acquired surgery centers and acquired doctors, and are trying to then kind of leverage their market power against other big players. And Envision is one of the biggest. And again, that was probably difficult to predict when they put this together. But it was $10 billion that has been largely lost. They'll get some value, but they're not going to make money on this deal. They're going to lose even with the shell game. And KKR is very good at financial engineering. They're losing a lot of money in this deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an interesting confluence, and I want to get to the HCA part of the story, but there's an interesting confluence here. Private equity coming in with a pretty typical financial engineering playbook. Let's merge these assets. Let's find operational efficiencies. Let's put the right management team in there. Let's relocate it to the hub of healthcare, Nashville, right, where the dominant business is. We execute a relationship with HCA in the market, so that immediately seems like it's going to be accretive, right? So all these things sort of look like they're going to play out in the right way. And then two forces that I think we talk about a lot and have been talking about so far on the show. One, the regulatory environment, so that the No Surprises Act, and two, the payviders, right? So, payers that, not only have scale in terms of, the size of their membership base and their, and their balance sheet, but also now have services oriented assets. And so they have an internal loop where they're not just checking costs, but they're also checking outcomes. They're able to check a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
And they're combining, both of those sciences, and ultimately their actuaries can come up and do research and say, look, these rates are ridiculous, for the outcomes that we're getting, or for the member satisfaction that we're getting, or et cetera, right? So,
yeah.
I think again, we see these situations where if you are not, an outstanding operator vis-a-vis HCA, which I want to now get to, with a clear foothold in fantastic markets and in a part of the business that the payviders generally at this point have decided they don't want to be in, which is, let's just call it generally the acute setting, the acute hospital-based setting, then, you could be in the crosshairs, right? I mean, the wrong combination of regulatory, agendas and payvider agendas can make any provider entity very, very vulnerable. So I think that is a general just trend to look at, and it'll be interesting to see how private equity firms look at this and make general decisions around what kind of businesses they want to invest in the future and which kinds they don't want to invest in the future. That is material to venture investors like us. But just to quickly talk about HCA. So HCA went into a joint venture with Envision in 2011. It's 50-50 joint venture. They called it Valesco, and it was really around, staffing their EDs. And I think what's interesting, obviously, we know how strong HCA is. A month ago, Sam Hazen, that HCA announced that HCA took over 90% ownership of that joint venture, right? So the writing has been on the wall around the Envision situation for a while. This is not new news. And the idea that HCA, especially on the heels of a fantastic quarterly earnings report, announced that they're taking a much, much stronger position in the joint venture, i.e. signaling to the market, we're taking control of this thing. And also, oh, by the way, this thing is throwing off $1 billion in EBITDA. So like the way that we've integrated it and implemented it into our systems is very, very functional. I think just shows again how operations like HCA also have positioned themselves to navigate these types of environments. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, Envision and KKR are left holding the bag, right? Like, if you look at over the course of a more than decade-long joint venture, while Envision is filing for bankruptcy, restructuring the debt, HCA is just fine. All of their operational integrity in place, and if anything, it now puts a piece on the board, AmSurge, in their market, and we've already seen in recent times where HCA acquired a significant portion of Brookdale, right? So, as these private equity, oriented assets, get into positions where they could be targets, especially when they're in the same town as HCA, they're in play. So I don't know anything about
what I was going to say. I think we don't know inside information about the
I
deal.
have no inside information at all, but I'm just looking at, how HCA has operated.
Right. But I'll point out, Tenet bought U.S. Surgical Partners, and it has been really successful for Tenet. HCA has, of course, watched that. I think the locations, the geographical footprint, I think they would be highly interested in more well-run surgery centers in their footprint. And I think they won't be interested if it's not in their footprint. That's just my
Yeah.
guess. So it's not clear if they'll sell it all. Amsterdam will sell it all. It may be strong enough to be an independent company like it was previously. They may sell off pieces and parts. I think you're exactly right that we're starting to see clear differences between a well-run health system with aligned incentives and delivering great care and also being financially responsible and financially healthy. And then there are a lot of systems that are not those things. And Envision had many partnerships with other health systems that didn't run their EDs very well. And that makes a significant difference in care, but also in the bottom line. And in the number of times you get hit with the No Surprises Act claim. I mean, HCA is the poster child for a well-run hospital, and other health systems need to get their act together and try to move towards that.
Yep. All right. Let's keep moving because my Aspen schedule is calling. Next thing I want to make sure we cover is the debt ceiling. So obviously, storyline on the debt ceiling has for months been, danger Will Robinson. I mean, it's been really pretty scary. The game of chicken that we're playing, and I think part of what makes it so scary is that we all have to admit we're in a moment in our government's history where it does not seem that our leaders in Congress are able to collaborate, much less communicate. And so there's been, I think, more question now than in previous years as to whether or not they really would play this game of chicken all the way through to the end. Would they allow the country to go into default to make a political point, and then try to blame the other party for the fallout of that? And so there has not been much good news on that front, I would say, until this week. And I don't know. I want to stop short of calling it good news, but at least the signal from the White House that the conversations have begun to become productive. And that sort of being paired with Yellen's serious warning that we have 2 weeks before we're out of cash and we're in serious trouble. So Vic, you've been a little bit more tuned into the news. Tell me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think if I had trust in politicians to try to do the right thing, this would not be even a topic we should talk about. But like the debt ceiling, of course, has to be lifted. There's no question about that. You and I were talking before the show. They sort of have both pulled their guns out and walked into the center of the street to talk about the negotiations. And you're absolutely right. Biden came out yesterday and said it was very productive, or some kind of non-committal but positive sign. I've been looking into it a lot because I'm nervous about it. I think I don't have trust in either side. I think there are wings of each party that are very extreme and don't want to necessarily come to a reasoned middle ground. And so that makes me nervous. They should get to an answer, but there's no deal that is in pencil on paper. It makes me nervous that we have 2 weeks left and there's not really an answer. Holding your gun, pointing at the other side, anything could happen and it would be really difficult. And I pulled up maybe I can share my screen again. I pulled up the credit default swap. So the market assesses these things with a credit default swap. So this is the chance that the United States would default on its debt. And people, they buy insurance basically, and other people would sell insurance. And you can see, for decades, it's been very low. In 2011 was the last time it got up to like 80 basis points. And where now it's never been this high in the history of doing credit default swaps. And that's not a good sign. Now, it doesn't mean anything other than the market is worried about this because I don't think the market has trust that our politicians will actually do the right thing. So we're recording this on Thursday morning. The 18th. They might come out this afternoon and fix it all. But we're going to have to watch it, unfortunately. I'd rather just not worry about the debt ceiling and go build healthcare assets.
Yeah. Last week, I was in San Francisco at an Axios event, their BFD event, and TPG's CEO was interviewed by Dan Primack, John Winkelried, and the last question was about the debt ceiling. And Winkelried said he's more worried than he's ever been. He said, he said, I'm hopeful, and I think cooler heads will prevail. But he did acknowledge that this government does appear to be more willing to push a political agenda and less willing to communicate. And so I think you're seeing that reflected in the credit default swap, rise, which is obviously
and it reflects what we talked about with Emily last week. I mean, no one has confidence in our elected officials, unfortunately, from either side. And so that's kind of scary in itself. And there are points in time when we need them to do their job. And so hopefully they will.
Yeah.
I know we're short on time. Let's take a minute to go to our sponsor because they are our friends at Jumpstart Foundry.
Yep. Sounds good.
I want to take a minute to talk about our investment vehicle, Jumpstart Foundry. It is the product that Marcus and I put together first. It invests in pre-seed companies at huge scale, 30, 40, 50 assets a year. Every year, Jumpstart Foundry invests in, across the U.S., the best and brightest entrepreneurs that are really making a difference, making something better in healthcare. If you listen to this podcast, you hear all the challenges, everything we're facing in healthcare. Bottom line is we spend $4 trillion a year and we don't get great outcomes. Jumpstart Foundry allows individuals for a very small minimum, $25K, you can come in and get to deploy that capital across the entire portfolio. You get immediate diversification. There are no management fees, super easy to get involved and really make a difference. You can have an impact. Come learn more at www.jsf.co. That's Jumpstart Foundry. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show.
All right, we're back. So we didn't dig into it last week much at all, but I think AI continues to be a major storyline of this day and time. I think there's always something coming out every week. I think last week the big storyline was Bard, having a big release, now being much more publicly available, being tied into Google's real-time data set. So that was, I think, in Gen Pop, that was the big AI storyline. But there are storylines in healthcare as well that we're constantly tracking. So Vic, you've been keeping up with this. Run us through what's going on in AI right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to do it pretty quickly because not everyone is interested. But as we talked about last week, we have to figure out productivity gains in healthcare. AI is the best way to get there, I think. And I'm just going to run through several things pretty quickly because there's a lot going on. And so this slide is about the pace of improvements. So in late November, it might have been November 30th or December 1st, ChatGPT came out. It has got all the attention in the general population. Everyone was playing with it over the holidays. It is sort of the standard. And so this graph is showing new competing models. These are large language models that would do exactly what ChatGPT does, and how good they are relative to that. And of course, ChatGPT may keep going. I'm sure they'll keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to point out is just the pace of change. So Facebook put out a thing called Llama in February. That was 68, 70% as good. And then some folks at Stanford sort of improved it 2 weeks later and got to about 3/4 as good as GPT. And then a open source community invested $300. My teenagers have that much money. They put $300 in and got to 92% of ChatGPT. And as you said, Bard is Google's platform. They came out last week on 93%. And so the pace of this is hard to get my head around. I mean, you and I have done tech investing, VC investing in healthcare for a long time, and things don't change this quickly, even in software.
No, listen, I mean, if for me, if there's no other reason for us doing this show, it's to have a weekly touch point to check where we are with AI. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And you know, as I look at the source on this image, the article does also prompt me to bring up the tagline that we heard from last week, which is there's no moat, right? Google said they have no moat, but neither does anyone else. Right. And that really is that's such a disruptive reality to this technology, different from, you know, so many technologies that we've seen over the last 15 years. Most of these technologies we've seen in Web 2 have been significant moat creators, you know, whether they be marketplaces or they be networks or they be, you know, really, really valuable databases. They've been moat creators. And this one, it's impossible to present where the moat's going to show up. So that's why it's so hard to be sure that the investments are actually that accretive, unless you then think about applying the technology to existing software through distribution. And that's where you start to feel like Microsoft and Google start to really run away with it, right? Because they've already got the install base on Google Search, Google Docs, you know, Microsoft Office, Teams, things of that nature. So that's where you start to really think about the power of distribution.
I've been thinking a lot about and trying to figure out, is this a continuing innovation, like something that would make the existing tech companies continue to dominate? Right. Or is it disruptive, meaning it is going to create a whole new set of big players that we don't know their names of yet? And I don't, it's not clear, but that no moat comment was leaked out of Google. They're pretty well connected in the tech world. All of these things we're showing right here are being offered free today, except for ChatGPT. And so you can get, for $300, you can create something that's 92% as good, you know, on your laptop. And so I don't know how much they're going to be able to charge at Microsoft and ChatGPT, but yes, they can reinforce Windows and Microsoft Office. Google can protect search for a time. But then I think I want to just quickly run through some other applications. There's a lot in healthcare going on, but just to give people a perspective. So this is a hedge fund like product that was started about a week ago. Is that right? I mean, it's a week, or maybe it's 10 days at this point. They're using ChatGPT to do trading. They were on CNN, as it says there. And in a week, or maybe it's 2 weeks, 10 days, they've got 13,000, almost 14,000 investors and $7.5 million. And so that's the kind of pace of change. I'm sure they've, you know, increased it since I made this slide this morning. We had the first really interesting advertisement. So Coke did about a 1.5 minute commercial using AI tools and the Coke advertising partners, really around artwork. It's called Masterpiece. I would encourage people to go watch it. It's a minute and a half, and incredible. And of course, it's showing Coke in a lot of different artworks. And they did it very quickly using a free model from Stability, which is an open source platform. But they did have creatives that they paid to do it. That same company, Stability, released their animation. So they did Stability Diffusion, which was the first really impressive image generating. They now have an animation generating tool, so you can say, "I'd like to see a cat in a space setting, crawling along a table," and it does a full animation for you for free, and it's incredible. That came out this weekend. And now we're seeing healthcare is starting to adopt it as well. So that's what's interesting, really, to our business and to our audience. The first place we're seeing a lot of traction, again, HCA is going to be in this story, is in the documentation. Documentation is really a time-consuming aspect of delivering medicine. If you want to get paid, you have to document your work in the electronic health record or electronic medical record. And that's been mandated by the federal government. So everyone uses EMRs. This was a study by Athena Health, but I think it's consistent. So by practice type, you can see that there's a lot of hours being spent weekly. And so orthopedics are spending 18 hours a week. OBGYN 18 hours a week. So, it's half of their week, if you assume a 40-hour week, is purely in keying stuff in or like with a microphone dictating what you're doing. Okay, so that's a lot of time. Back to our productivity question,
Right.
And so HCA announced that they're partnered with Augmedix, which is an ambient powered AI tool. So it sits behind the scenes, listens to what the doc is doing in the engagement of the patient, and then it creates the documentation ready to be inserted to the EMR. Doc reviews it much faster just to review what's there, maybe makes a quick correction. The AI tool begins to learn with the corrections. And our friend of ours at HCA, Mike Slosser, is in charge of innovation. He's leading this. They're testing it, right? So it's a pilot. But Augmedix is publicly traded, which is an interesting thing. It's small in San Francisco, and we have not much time, but there's a whole list of other startups using this technology. And again, it's so cheap that we're going to have a ton of trials, and it's going to really make an impact.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's an incredible rundown of everything that's going on in AI. So thanks for capturing that while I'm
partnered with.
Yeah, no, I was just saying thanks for capturing all that while I've been up here in the mountains.
No problem. You're learning about philosophy and cool things, and that'll be helpful too. But there's a ton of news, and we've been holding the April news. It didn't seem like there was enough traction, but Epic in mid-April, right after the HCA announcement, partnered with Microsoft. And they now have embedded ChatGPT in all their EMR systems, which is, like you said, distribution sometimes wins the game, right? And Epic has incredible distribution. It'll be interesting to see what Cerner does. And then the last I'll mention is 3M. 3M is kind of behind the scenes in healthcare, but they do a lot of HIS technology systems, kind of behind the scenes that make health systems work. And they formed a collaboration with Amazon. Amazon has not released a full large language model, I think because they sort of guessed correctly that wasn't going to be a moat that would really make a difference. And they're trying to, sort of provide the cloud services to anyone that wants to utilize this stuff. 3M is partnering with them. And so that, I know we are short on time, but just to give people a quick update, they really should go watch that animation, go watch the Coke video, check out what HCA or Epic. I mean, these are not groups that do trial things that are just research projects. These are serious healthcare organizations that are jumping into this, and I think everyone should be learning about it.
Yeah, and I guess maybe just one final word I'll offer before we do have to wrap up is that I think the way that we work being changed by AI is something that people are going to have to work at. I think eventually, and the way I would kind of liken it is, thinking about how seamless it is now to work on your phone and those gestures, right? All the gestures you do, pinch and zoom, swiping. These things were not natural things that we did when the iPhone first came around, right? So there's this transition that we have to go through. I actually wrote my first business article in partnership with AI. I did an angel investment in this tool called Type.ai, not investing advice. But I did it because I wanted to force myself to have a vested investment a vested reason to learn, right? So I'm using this tool to try to learn how to write with AI because it's not comfortable for me because I've written a book and I write a lot and I like to write on my own.
Yeah. You have to learn
And
it's a new interface. It's a new way to, yeah.
Yeah, it's a new interface, and you're having to sort of, and also like it's not perfect, right? And so one thing I think about there, and the reason why I know that it's a pilot, and Dr. Slasha will do a great job with his team at HCA on figuring out how the physician's workflow changes. It is a fundamental workflow change. It will not be a situation where you're talking and then you can just 100% trust, what the output is. We are shifting to being co-authors and editors with the AI, right? And that's just a different mindset than you being the full-on author and maybe not even editing, right? Because you trust yourself on that first draft so much. It's a very, very different mindset, writing versus editing. And so I think even when we look at the animation or the image, generation stuff, all these things put us more in the role of an editor, and a curator and a discerning mind and an evaluator, as opposed to an author, a creator, and that's a shift in mindset that is going to take some time to work through. So as much as you encourage people to go view the Coke commercial, I also want to encourage people to start to try to do real work with these tools, right? So you can start to get a sense of how your workflow and how your mindset will have to shift in order to accommodate how this new technology will change the world.
That's exactly how I feel. It is going to change the way we interact with each other and with health systems and with technology. And my belief personally is I need to learn how to leverage this technology. Like I learned to use a cell phone.
Yes.
And we all have seen our older parents or grandparents, whoever, maybe adopt cell phones 5 years after us. And it's a hard learning curve. And once you're through it, you don't understand, you just pinch here. But when you don't know what pinch the screen means, those aren't words that in the 1990s meant anything. You can't pinch a screen.
Right.
It doesn't actually pinch. And then we start reusing words. And so the reason to kind of bring this up, and I'm diving into how would I design an agent to take action for me every night, wake up and do something for the same reason you're trying to write something. It's just playing with it and getting your hands kind of dirty and seeing where does it not work is the only way I think to really start to learn the interface and then circle back. So I agree completely.
And I think there is a psychological aspect of it. And I think this is probably the Aspen experience for me. But I would say, changing and adopting these tools, there is a bit of grief, I think, in the loss of a sense of identity with the way that you worked in the past and the time and effort you invested to be able to be competent and be valued in the way that you worked in the past. Yeah. And so that's why voluntarily leaning into that and just dealing with the grief proactively, as opposed to it being thrust upon you, is going to be the preferable way. But I'm not sure the grief is avoidable. I'm telling you, I'm feeling it in writing. I take great pride in the skill that I've developed around writing, and I want to continue that because I feel that there's personal benefit to that process. But I know that not all writing is the same. Some writing, especially business writing, I don't know that I would use AI to like write my book, but business writing, certainly, AI can be a helpful tool for that.
Yeah, there's no question. It is sad. I think I'm pretty good at Excel modeling, right? So I'm proud of that. And I'm sad that I believe that value in the world is going to deteriorate over time. And I was telling my son, so I have 2 teenage boys. I was telling them this story, and then I'll let you go to actually learn something. But when I started as a VC, I got a job at Massey Birch, an old, very established venture firm, because of my skills with Excel. I didn't know venture very well, didn't know it at all. It was my first job. But one of the partners there was using a slide rule, which is not as good as Excel, just like clearly not as good. And he was not willing to give it up because he had invested a long time in the 70s and 80s building that skill. And he was really good at using a slide rule to calculate things. And he could calculate much faster than I could on paper. But I killed him in Excel because Excel is a better tool. It's a more powerful tool.
Yeah.
And what I was saying to my teenage boys is they're going to come up in the world being 16, 18, 20, 22 with this new set of tools, and it won't be hard for them, just like Excel wasn't hard for me. I have to lean in and really force myself to do this because it is going to be hard for me to abandon a tool like Excel. And whatever tools you're used to using, you need to think about, how is this going to change? Because AI is going to change. I mean, Sundar from Google is calling it fire. He thinks it's like the invention of fire, and it's going to change everything. But I don't think we can stop that. We should have to try to educate ourselves so that we know what's coming.
All right. So on that note, man, thanks for doing so much heavy lifting this week, putting the show together. Appreciate you. And we'll be back. Yeah. I'm coming back. We'll be back in the studio next week. I'm looking forward to it. And until then, risks and disclaimers. This is not investment advice. We're just two VCs trying to figure out the world, and hoping that you benefit from listening to our conversations about it. And thanks for listening. And please tell your friends to subscribe, share this with somebody. We're just getting off out of the blocks, and the way that this show is going to grow is by not just you listening, but you sharing it with somebody that you think would benefit from it. So please do that. Give us 5 stars on iTunes, or give us a like or subscribe on YouTube. We are on YouTube. We do this on video as well as audio. So you may be listening to this on our podcast feed, but just know when we talk about images or graphs or any of those kinds of things, they're on the screen because we're doing video versions as well. And thanks for being along on the journey with us. This journey to try to figure out where health is going.
I'll just chime in. Yes, give us 5 stars. Also, give us some feedback. If you want to hear more of something or have questions or less of something, let us know. We're still evolving this.
Yep. All right. Until next week. See you.